Welcome to Fresh Catholic, a podcast for those who are converting, reverting, or simply want a fresh perspective of the Catholic faith to help them to open their hearts and minds to become closer to the love and goodness of Christ. My daily prayer is that I will be a bright light to others, to be filled with the love and light of Christ, so that when people look at me, they see Him radiating out from me for His glory. Hello and welcome. I'm Lori Balderas, and I'm so happy you're here. Today, I would like to introduce my guest, Father Austin Litke. He's a Dominican friar of the province of St. Joseph. He was ordained a priest in 2011 and has served as chaplain to patients at Sloan Kettering Memorial Cancer Hospital in New York City, as well as to students at New York University. He earned a doctorate in parasitic theology from the Pontifical Parasitics Institute of the Lateran University in Rome and has taught at the Pontifical University of St. Thomas in Rome, as well as the Dominican House of Studies in Washington, D.C. He has just recently moved to Rome to teach at the Anglicum. Father Austin is a member of the Hillbilly Theists, and he is here today to discuss the third annual Dominican Rosary Pilgrimage coming up Saturday, September 27th in Washington, D.C. It's an all-day event that is certain to inspire many people to become closer to our Blessed Mother and our Lord, Jesus Christ, and the Catholic faith. Please have a listen to my interview with Father Austin. Well, hello, Father Austin. How are you today?
Very well. Thank you, Lori.
Thank you so much for coming today. I know you are a very busy gentleman.
Well, I've just moved to Rome. And so, moving from the States to Italy is always has its complications.
Oh, you're already in Rome?
I'm here.
Oh, yeah. My goodness. I think, well, first of all, for my listeners, a couple weeks ago, if you watched a couple weeks ago, we were talking about that there was a change in our schedule and I had to rally and come up with a subject really quickly. And it's because Father Austin was having a moving issue, but I didn't know you had actually moved. I was thinking you were moving in October.
Right. Yeah. So our school year here in Rome starts in October. But because I'm coming back to the States for the Rosary Pilgrimage, I decided to move here to take care of all the immigration and other kinds of things that you have to do when you come to Italy. So I've been in the middle of all that for the last several days, actually.
Okay, then I forgive you for not being able to come a couple of weeks ago. I mean, I already forgave you, but now that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, that's exciting.
It was one of those things that day. That day just with getting things packed up and moved over. It was just one of those days that just couldn't happen. So thank you for your patience.
Absolutely. I'm just happy to have you. So speaking of your Rosary Pilgrimage, that's why you're here today, is to let us know about that. And in my intro, I gave some details about it. So I'm going to ask you some questions about it today because I personally have not heard of this pilgrimage before, which isn't, I'm sure a lot of people have heard of it. It's just Lori Balderas hasn't heard of it. So I want to be sure that I and my listeners really understand what's the purpose behind it. And I'll ask you some questions. And I can't wait to hear about this event. I think it's a really timely and really beautiful thing for you to be a part of. So
I'm really happy to be able to talk about it and really happy and really grateful to you for having me on.
Oh, wonderful. So tell us like the details, of the what, where, when, why, those sorts of things.
Sure. Yeah, so the Dominican Rosary Pilgrimage is the third annual one, so it's also rather new and maybe one of the reasons you haven't heard of it. And it takes place at the Basilica of the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception in Washington, D.C. So it's right kind of on the campus of the Catholic University of America, but kind of right next to it, I guess, technically. And it's a full day event, and there are talks that are going to be given. So I'm going to be the main preacher this year. And so there'll be kind of two talks throughout the day, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. And then there's lots of time for confessions. There's kind of the culmination of it is a big rosary pilgrimage around the basilica there, or a rosary procession, I should say. And so it's kind of a big procession, and there's music that goes along with it, but it's also the praying of the rosary in a really solemn manner, which most people probably don't have the experience of. And then the day itself kind of ends with Mass. And then after the Mass, there's a concert by a band called the Hillbilly Thomas, which is a band of Dominican friars who play kind of bluegrass inspired kind of Americana folk kind of music that we'll do on the lawn right next to the Basilica at CUA.
And aren't you a part of that band?
I am. I have the great honor of being one of the Hillbilly Thomas. So
Oh
I'll be
my
on.
goodness.
Yeah. So if you come, you're going to see a lot of me that day, for better or for worse. So I'll be in the pulpit, then on the stage later as well.
You are going to be so busy that day, but that sounds like a really amazing event.
Yeah, it's a great day. I was not able to attend the first one, but last year I was able to attend. And the Basilica is a huge place. I don't know what the numbers are that actually it actually holds, but it's a huge number of people. And it's just really beautiful because I think most of us, depending on what your Catholic experience is, the biggest number of Catholics that you kind of get together and do something Catholic together might be Mass, on a Sunday or something like that. But to be in a place with thousands of other people from all over the place that are all coming together to do something about your faith, like a really public manifestation of your faith, is a really beautiful thing. And it's something that, again, a lot of us don't necessarily have experience of. And so that's, I think, maybe one of the most remarkable things about it is just the sort of corporate nature of it, which is a beautiful part of the whole pilgrimage.
Well, and I also believe that when you hear about people doing events, or when a church just has an event like a picnic or something, or there are retreats that are being done for all different ages, those events where you're with Catholics and you're doing a lot of praying, and it's kind of like, it's very structured, like I think the Catholic faith is very structured. That's one thing I love about it. But that way people really get a sense, like you're here today explaining this, so people will get a sense of what the event is about. But I get the impression that every time people go to retreats or events like this, it can be very life-changing for people.
Right. No, these sorts of events, like like you say, a pilgrimage or a retreat or something like this. Yeah, it's one of those moments that God definitely uses in people's lives to bring them to some sort of deeper conversion and kind of a deeper moment of prayer, a deeper experience of whatever He wants to give them. And so I think this is why it's part of our tradition, is that you have this sort of day-to-day living out of the faith and kind of private prayer, and the rosary obviously becomes, a part of people's private prayer very often, or maybe just kind of small groups at church or something like this. But then in life, you do have these moments where you enter into something that's kind of bigger than that. And it does kind of open up the heart and the mind to a deeper experience. And so that's what a pilgrimage is always supposed to be in some way. This is the classical sense of pilgrimage, right? Is that you have this rather intense and kind of different kind of moment that, classically a pilgrimage was something that was a penance, right? And so it was something that would kind of leave you off kilter a little bit. And this is one of the ways that God works with souls, right? Is that we get off kilter a little bit and we actually start to hear and to listen a bit more deeply. And so that's, of course, the hope anytime that the church and her ministers kind of put something like this together.
Well, and I also feel that, first of all, I don't know if you realize this, but I'm a convert, so I wasn't raised in the Catholic faith. Mm-hmm. So many things about the Catholic faith I'm still learning, even though I've been Catholic now for a little over 10 years. But that's one of the things I love about it, is I'm constantly learning, constantly like figuring things out. And I tell my listeners all the time, we're never going to know everything, but trying to find out and trying to ask questions and be a part of things is how we learn. But I do think that when people have these experiences, it can be very overwhelming and powerful to just be around people that are in your like mindset, where you feel free to be able to pray and be able to pray the rosary, talk about Jesus, have, uplifting conversations and experiences. And in our world, as we know, things are very angry and very hostile and very aggressive most of the time. And even within our own families, it's in the workplace, it's in our families. That's life. That's how life is. But it is very hot these days. And I think, I just know from like I work at our church, and last week we had our regular staff meeting, and we started off in adoration in front of the Blessed Sacrament before our staff meeting. And it was so beautiful. I love adoration no matter what's going on, but it was so beautiful as a staff to do that.
Sure.
I think it's such a blessing to work at a church and work in a parish where at work you can pray, and at work you can talk about, your religion and Jesus, and that's a part of your job. I think that's so beautiful. So I think like these events, which I don't feel like Catholics have very many big events where, I mean, maybe I'm wrong about that, but I tend to think we are more inward. And when people are given an opportunity to go to something like this, I think everybody should seize that opportunity. Like if you're able to go on a retreat, able to go on a pilgrimage, able to go to an event like this, I think take your family, take, your friends, make a day of it. And it sounds like you guys have this whole thing where you don't know who's going to be drawn in for what reason. Like some people might want to come to the rosary part, and then they stay because they go, oh, we want to check out this awesome band that's going to be playing. You never know how God's going to work in somebody's life and heart.
No, that's right. Yeah, like you said, that it seems like Catholics don't do as many of these big events. I think in the last couple generations, I think that's true for the most part. But this rosary pilgrimage in some ways is modeled on something that used to happen quite often within American Catholic life, at least, such that there used to be things like a Eucharistic Congress. So that's also been kind of redone in the last several years in America as well, right? With the Eucharistic pilgrimage and everything that happened in Indianapolis. What was that, 2 summers ago now? But there also used to be, these rosary confraternities that have these rosary conferences and that sort of thing, or a Marian conference, or a Holy Name Society thing. I mean, there was a famous one that I think filled Yankee Stadium, at one point. It was all men. That's what the Holy Name Society was for. It was kind of a Catholic men's organization. So these things used to happen. I think for whatever reason, I can't really sociologically analyze it, but it's just to say, I think people, for whatever reason, didn't want those kind of big public manifestations of their faith as much anymore. But I think people are coming around and saying, no, this is actually super important to us. One of my favorite kind of experiences of this was I had been ordained a priest about 2 months whenever World Youth Day was in Madrid. So this is 2011. And I was asked to be the chaplain for a group of high school girls and some Dominican sisters that were going. And so we went, and on the way to Madrid, we went to Fatima. And we were there, every month in Fatima, there's like a national pilgrimage there for the 13th of the month, which was the day of the apparitions there. And the square that's outside of the main devotional church there in Fatima is about twice as big as St. Peter's Square, if that gives any kind of sense. It's huge. And I was with this group of, I think it was 16 high school girls from suburban Baltimore. Most of them had never been on an airplane or out of the country before, and we go into this square, which was jam-packed full of people, candles and singing, and people on their knees, walking across it was all this thing. And for them, this was this huge experience of like, oh my gosh, it's not just my parish. It's not just my Catholic school. There are all these people. And then, of course, we went to World Youth Day, and there were millions of people there as well. And so that kind of corporate experience can, it just opens your horizons, in that way. But you're able to do things like, talk about your faith, pray the rosary out loud together. Part of World Youth Day, is that you have adoration and that vigil, so you have like millions of people out in a field, half of them, myself included, like, heat stroking out, or something like this. And then there's like adoration going on. It's perfectly quiet. It's incredible, these experiences. So, so I think it's really important for the church to kind of think about how do we facilitate these sorts of things, because like you're saying too, and this has been a really constant experience I've had as a priest over 14 years now, is that so often people will come and talk to you, as a priest, and they always want to talk about something of the faith or what's going on in their life or what's going on with this or that. And at a certain point, you're like, do they think that that's all I care about? Like, I could talk about something else. But then you realize, actually, most people have no other space in their life where they can talk to someone about the faith and that what gives their life its meaning in some way. And so it's a really important part of our, life as priests, is to kind of say, okay, this is what I represent to people, and I need to be able to facilitate that and take that seriously, and to give people the kind of time and place to do that. So I think a pilgrimage like we're trying to put on it does all of those things, and that's really important for people. So I'm really happy for people to know about it.
Well, it's kind of interesting that you say that about, that people obviously equate you with, we can safely talk about our faith. When I became Catholic, I lost some friends over it. My family wasn't super happy. When I married my husband, Simon, or when he and I started dating, I was so happy because he lets me talk about Jesus whenever I want. And, that's one thing that we really have in common, is that I don't have to talk him into anything. He doesn't have to convince me of anything. We are, that's the, of course, that's the main part of our marriage and our sacrament, is that we're in this with Jesus. But that's one thing I love, because I remember one time talking to my mom, and she was asking me questions about Jesus and about my faith. And when I was answering her, she finally said, "That's enough." Oh, that's enough.
Yeah.
It's never enough. No. So that's interesting. The other thing, as you were talking about, the World Youth Day and everything, I know that that's just a huge event. And I always just get so excited to hear of the numbers of youth. And then, that's just a beautiful thing to me to even imagine. And, on one hand, it's like, I am saying, we need more events as Catholics, but I also, nothing against our Protestant brothers and sisters, but I don't want it to turn into like a rah-rah, loud spectacle. I think it's nice to imagine that it's a more prayerful way to gather. It's done in a different way. I don't think we need all the lights and the banging. And if people love that, I applaud them, and they should go do that. And if that's how they want to worship, I love that. But that would be like my one thing that I would be worried. I struggle with some of the modernization of our faith. So I think it's beautiful to gather in a huge group, but still keep it reverent and, focused on the Lord, in a prayerful
it's always
way.
Possible. Yeah. I think there's a couple of things to say about that. Pope Leo has done this a couple of times now, and reflections he's made, where he's contrasted the liturgy and spectacle, because this is a distinction that comes out of the early church, actually, because the fathers of the church, whenever they would celebrate the liturgy, especially when they would preach, they always set it up as a contrast to what was happening in, say, like the Colosseum, because that was the spectacle, and there was something really tantalizing about that for people, but it was also deeply destructive to their soul, somehow. And he said, no, the liturgy is the antidote to that. And so the liturgy always has to have some distinct difference for what's going on in that as well, and so I think we always, anytime that we do something as Catholics, it's always kind of like, okay, what are we going to do that's not just Catholic veneer over something that's deeply worldly somehow, That said, we're also human beings who do live in the world. And so, when you go on pilgrimage, especially if you're traveling somewhere to go on a pilgrimage, you're also traveling. And like, you have to eat and you have to see stuff, and you're in a place you've never been before. So I'll go back to World Youth Day. We had these high school girls who had never been on an airplane or outside the country. And so the Dominican sisters that I was with, they programmed a morning or an afternoon, I can't remember, one of our days in Madrid was shopping time. And it was really important to do that, actually, because these girls had never been in a foreign country. They never, and they got to do that. Well, because also what was super important was like they knew that that was coming. And so when it was time to pray, it was time to pray. When it was time to go to bed, it was time to go to bed. When it was time to like meet people and be at this big thing, and they weren't trying to like kind of look around and stop off on the way to something to do that. It's like, no, you do that too. And so like living in Rome, I've lived in Rome before. And so when people come, again, they have their list of like churches and churchy things they want to do. It was like, well, there's also other things in Italy you should do. And that's all part of like being on a pilgrimage, Again, there is something penitential, frankly, just about traveling and just being around and walking in the heat and this sort of thing. So offer that up, make that a real experience. But also it's like, have a good meal, have a glass of wine. Like there's nothing wrong with that. It's actually a good thing to do. So I think, and this is something that I think, the sacramentality of Catholicism does so well is that we're able to integrate all those things together, actually.
Yeah.
This came home to me years ago in Lourdes, actually. So another great pilgrimage place, right? Have you been to Lourdes before,
No.
Lori? Okay, it's got to be on your list because in some ways it's like the most Catholic place on earth because you've got the domain, as they call it, which is where the grotto is, where Bernadette had the apparition, where the spring is still flowing. You've got the big church that was built there. There's this other big kind of cavernous church that's also there. But then also they've got the hospices where they take care of the sick there. People go and volunteer there all the time. It's absolutely gorgeous. You've got these candlelight processions at night. It's awesome. But then right outside the domain is all of these, frankly, kind of kitschy shops and restaurants and things and bars where people are having drinks and having meals. And it's like, no, for Catholics, like you do both. It's both and for us, this way. And seeing that is something really beautiful. And again, I think it communicates something about the kind of Catholic ethos and kind of the Catholic culture. This is like, no, it's a full human life where all of these things are true. All of these things are good and need to be integrated somehow.
Right. Yeah, that is one of the things I love about it too. It's filled with tradition, but I do feel like, you're meant to love your life, live your life. And that's how, by food and drink and happiness and things, along with the suffering and the struggles.
Yeah, that's going to come anyway. So you might as well find something to integrate it into.
That's right. We're going to take a short break. And when we come back, we'll talk more about the pilgrimage. We'll be right back. What is happening at Fresh Catholic? Thanks for asking. Well, we have a weekly podcast with lots of topics and guests, and Fresh Catholic Daily, the daily Mass readings. Listen on all platforms and watch on YouTube. I also do short videos every day on Instagram and Facebook at Fresh Catholic. Like, share, subscribe, rate, and review. These are such simple ways to help us out. The other ways you can support our mission of drawing people to the faith or back to the faith are by becoming a Patreon or sponsor. Also simple, but so needed. Our website, freshcatholic.com, has an online store with merchandise, a blog, comics, and Fresh Catholic courses with educator Charles Merritt, with the Hail Mary, the Our Father, the Virtues, the Ascension, the Magi, the Visitation, the Ten Commandments, Sacraments and Grace, Sin, Advent, Angels, Lent, Typology, and even some Bible study courses. Wow, that's a lot. Please share all of this with everyone you know and join the Fresh Catholic family. And remember, be focused, be faithful, and be fresh. And we're back. Okay, so if you have an eagle eye, you notice something has changed. I have a microphone. Technicalities, people, technicalities. So we're back. I have a mic, but we're still with Father Austin, so yay. So Father Austin, what I'm wondering is, can you please just make sure we know the dates about when this pilgrimage is happening?
Sure. So it's going to take place on September 27th. So that's a Saturday at the end of September. And it's in Washington, D.C. at the Basilica of the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception, which is right there next to the campus of Catholic University of America. And we always do it at the end of September because the month of October is traditionally consecrated to the Rosary because of the Feast of Our Lady of the Rosary on October 7th. And so we always try to kind of do it right before then in order to kind of prepare people to experience that feast day, but also to kind of dedicate themselves more deeply to the rosary during the month of October.
Now, I live in California and I'm not going to be able to make it. So, is there a way for me to be able to participate in some way?
Well, I think you should get serious and buy a plane ticket and come out, you know. But for people who can't do that, the day is live streamed, and you can find details for that on the Dominican Rosary Pilgrimage website. But the talks and the procession and the mass, everything will be live streamed. The concert at the end of the day, I think, is not live streamed, if I recall. I think that's technically difficult to do outside and to sound and that sort of thing.
Oh, man. That's too bad.
You'll just have to come to a concert otherwise.
So now this is a rosary pilgrimage, and I know there's a lot of people out there who don't understand the rosary. They don't understand our love and devotion to our Blessed Mother. They think we worship her. A lot of people, if you even try to explain our love and devotion for the Blessed Mother, they really don't even. My experience is they don't want to hear our reasons or why. But I would love for you to explain, because some of my listeners are actually considering becoming Catholic. So that's
Sure.
a big group of my listeners. So for those people, and also I have a lot of people that listen that aren't Catholic. So if you could explain, what is the importance of the rosary? Why do we have this love of our Blessed Mother? And how are you incorporating all this into this pilgrimage?
Right. No, those are really good questions. Yeah, and I mean, I grew up in Kentucky, so like western part of Kentucky, which is deeply Protestant. I think my home county in Kentucky, talking about counties, not cities, because we don't, have huge cities. My home county was 6% Catholic, so I was a minority growing up. And so I encountered a lot of people growing up who would say, no, you people worship Mary, whatever, these sorts of things. And my experience of the faith has been, you can't love Christ without loving his mother, because she's totally co-involved in the work of redemption from the very beginning. The fact that if Christ becomes human, he becomes human because he takes his humanity from his mother. And so she's totally involved from the beginning into the foot of the cross, right? And even after, she's the mother of the church. She's with the apostles. And so in order to get to know Christ, in order to be a member of the church, you have to have Mary as your mother as well. I mean, Christ himself gives her to us, on the cross. And so what I found too, rather tragically, we've had Charlie Kirk's, death recently. And he was an evangelical Christian, right? But I remember, his wife's Catholic. And I remember seeing a little clip of a video of him saying just that. He's just kind of like, hey, look, we need to respect Catholics because they actually hold Mary in a place that we usually don't. And she's obviously central to what it means to be a Christian, somehow. So I think on the kind of generic level, that's a really important thing to think about and to understand, and not to allow maybe some of the polemics of the Protestant Reformation or other things to kind of cloud our ability to kind of see the importance of Mary within the church's life and within the church's devotional life. But then the importance of something like the rosary, then, where does that kind of fit in? Throughout from the very beginning of the church, you have the liturgy, you have the mass, you have the scriptures, you have the liturgy of the hours, so the divine office. So you have this sort of official places of worship within the church, but then there's always been a devotional life that both kind of prepares and extends our experience of the liturgy, that kind of official worship of the church somehow, because we can't be in church every single day or every single hour of the day, right? Even religious, right? I mean, so I'm in church, hours a day for prayer and, for other things, but I've also got to do other things. And so the church recognizes this and says, we have to have ways of continually bringing to mind, bringing to our mind, bringing to our heart, bringing to our body, even ways of remembering the mysteries of the faith and entering into the realities of the faith throughout our day. So what I always say to people, like, if you ever come to a religious house, so, a monastery, a convent, religious house, You'll notice that there's a lot of religious art on the walls, and not always of the highest quality, it has to be said. And this is not because we have bad taste or we can't think of anything better to put on. I have nothing on my walls. I just moved here a week ago. It's not because we can't think of anything better to put on our walls, but the idea behind religious life in a religious house is what, and think about what happens in a church too, is that every time you turn a corner, you've got something reminding you of the realities that you're supposed to be living in, you know? And this is what the devotional life of the church is about. And this is one of the, I think, the great values and functions of the rosary, is that it's a way of daily reminding ourselves and entering more deeply into the mysteries of the life of our Lord and of Our Lady, which are supposed to become the pattern and stuff of the mysteries of our lives as well. Because the life of Christ, the life of Mary, is also supposed to be our life as well. And so what the rosary does, particularly the meditation on the mysteries, is supposed to be the continual re-presentation of those things so that our thick heads and our thick hearts can allow those things to kind of soak in over time, is the idea. And so the rosary, with its repetition, with its mysteries, you know, this way, and even with the physicality of it, you know, I mean, Dominicans, we wear a rosary on our belt, you know, so we've got it like with us all day long. Even the physicality of the rosary is something else that communicates not just to our mind or to our heart, but also to our body, the reality of the thing that we're supposed to be entering into continually, not just at Sunday Mass, not just whenever we do sacramental, not just when we're going to confession, or not just even when we're saying our prayers, but like even like throughout the day, you know. That's why, you know, until recently, and even a lot of people still do this, it was very typical for people who didn't even go to Sunday Mass, by the way, that they would have a rosary in their pocket. And maybe there was something halfway superstitious about it, but I think there was also something just beautiful. It's like, no. There's a constant reminder throughout my day, all the time. You even see like people would like keep rosaries on their rear view mirrors in their car, you know, and this sort of thing. Again, is there the possibility of superstition that comes in? Maybe. However, I think it was another way of remembering the realities that I'm living in and the world and the life that I'm called to while I'm living in this world, in this life, that way. And so I think in a sort of generic sense, that's really the function, kind of the place and the utility, you know, of the rosary, and what it helps us to do ultimately.
Well, and I like what you're saying too. Again, that's one of the things I love about our faith is it's an all day, everyday lifestyle. It's not, you don't turn it off and on. You don't just turn it on Sunday and turn it off as soon as you leave church. At least I don't, you know. And yes, having these reminders, having a crucifix, having art of, you know, our Lord, having your Bible, having the rosary. You know, I wear medals on saint medals, and I also have Jesus on my medal chain. I wear that every day. I wear a crucifix every day, and I know it's there. I'll rub them when I'm praying. They give me comfort. They give me, you know, it's kind of like just an outward sign, and it helps me to throughout the day when I'm praying to focus on those things instead of distractions, because there's a lot of distractions.
Totally. No, it's exactly it. And so this is the thing, is that, you know, we are embodied creatures. And so when we're living, you know, in the world of material things, our eyes, our minds, our hearts are going to be distracted by other things. And so what the devotional life of the church does is to call us back to those things that we're called to live in. You know, there's a traditional value within like monastic life, which is also just a traditional kind of Christian value of what we call recollection. And what does recollection mean? It just means that I'm able to focus. It's not kind of the evacuation of the mind, you know, in a sort of Eastern kind of Buddhist sort of thing, you know, getting rid of distractions and mindfulness and that sort of thing. That's not actually Christian. What the Christian wants to do is to actually fill the mind, but just with very particular things. And sometimes that does require pushing out distractions. That does require taking things away, but it always requires turning towards something, not just away from things as well. And so I think the devotional life of the church, and particularly the rosary, which, I mean, as a Dominican, I think is obviously the best devotion ever. But it's what all of these things are supposed to be doing in our life. And it helps us do the very thing that we're supposed to be doing as Christians, which is allow Christ to totally fill our minds and our hearts.
I love that. I've never even really heard anybody explain it like that before. And I really love what you're saying, because it is true. We're not trying to empty our mind. We are trying to fill it. That's a perfect way to say it. I love that. I've never really heard that. I think I'm sure it's out there somewhere, but not on my show. This is the first time we've heard it on my show.
I definitely stole it from somebody, but but it's also, anyone who's tried to pray on a consistent basis and try to, live the life of prayer knows the difficulty of, distractions, right? And so there's a temptation. And I think this is why a lot of Western Christians get interested in transcendental meditation or Buddhist this and that, because they have techniques to get rid of distractions, right? Christianity also has techniques, by the way. There's a whole tradition of meditation and prayer that we have, but people kind of abandon that in some ways for other things. But for the Christian, it's like getting rid of distraction is a means, not an end. And the end, the goal, is to allow my mind and my heart to be filled, namely with Christ himself. And so meditating on his life, meditating on the words of Scripture, meditating on the life of the Blessed Virgin Mary, these are the things that refocus and consecrate the mind and the heart over time.
I also find I pray the rosary every morning. I wake up abundantly early. I wake up at 3:30 in the morning to start my day and pray and different things. So I pray the rosary every morning, but I also pray the rosary kind of throughout the day, like if there's a lull or if there's a moment where instead of doing maybe, Instagram or something, I will pick a moment where it's completely silent and I'll pray the rosary. So it's like you can pray at any time, anywhere. You don't, it's this beautiful thing, that really does center us and help us in, I think it helps me to focus more, I guess, that's.
Oh, totally. And I think that's a really beautiful use of the rosary. Because again, there's one way to pray the rosary, which is kind of like, you're in church or you're in a place where you can pray and it's totally kind of undistracted and very kind of concentrated. But it also is something that can accompany you throughout the day. And this is what you see, especially within Dominican life. I've seen, especially older friars, you would see kind of walking around the cloister in a house and just kind of praying the rosary all day long, just kind of, or you'll see guys walking from one thing to the other and they're kind of praying the rosary, and so it just is something that kind of accompanies your day as well. And it just becomes that sort of lifeline. I remember one of my kind of earlier memories too. My grandfather they lived out in the country, my grandparents did, and sometimes he would just sit out in a field in a chair and would just sit there. And I remember asking him one day, I was like, what do you do all day? What are you doing out there? He was retired, right? He's kind of doing whatever he wants. And he's like, I just sit there and pray the rosary. I probably pray it 2 or 3 times while I'm sitting there. He's like, you just sit and you pray and you don't do anything else, And I remember thinking, okay, that's a thing, and there was something really edifying about that. There's just no, for him, this was important. He was a World War II veteran, ran a garage for 40 years, this sort of thing. But at the end of his life, that was important to him. And I just thought that was something really beautiful and interesting and something that I think we can all learn from.
That is beautiful. I'm probably going to muck up this story, but one of the things I love is, Dodger Stadium is set up in a rosary pattern for, I think it was the owner or somebody that started the Dodgers, and his wife was Catholic. So he made the trees in a rosary pattern and she would go walk it and pray the rosary. Have you heard that before?
Oh, cool. I've never heard that before.
Yeah. And the color blue for Dodger blue is for Mary.
Oh my gosh, that's great.
Isn't that beautiful?
Is that right? Okay. Yeah, I didn't know any of that. Well, you'll have to host us out in LA for a rosary pilgrimage sometime. We'll do it at Dodger Stadium. How about that? Fill it up.
So I'm wondering, what are your hopes and prayers for this pilgrimage, the rosary pilgrimage, the end of this month?
Yeah. So basically, I think the big hope is just to, a bit like we were talking about earlier, is to give people the opportunity and the space to live their faith in a really manifest way, in a way that you can't on a daily basis or even on Sundays at your parish or something like that, to give people that kind of moment of grace to be able to hear whatever the Lord wants to communicate to them and to speak to them and to call them into, and to do it in the ways that God through his church has given us to do that, So there's nothing gimmicky or new about what happens at the Rosary Pilgrimage at all. It's talks, which is, preaching, it's confessions, it's the Rosary itself, it's Mass, it's presentations, on things. I mean, maybe the Hillbilly Thomas concert at the end is gimmicky, maybe. But all of those things, we're just trying to give people the opportunity to enter more deeply into this really essential part of their life of faith, which I think in the church's life, anything, even if you're trying to innovate or do something new, it's always got to return you to what's essential about the faith. And if it's something new or something totally different, you have to be like, okay, what's going on here? And so I always think something healthy within the life of the church is always returning us to something that's basic and true and essential to the faith.
Right. When people come to this, do they need to purchase tickets, or can they kind of come and go? Can they come for the whole day, or maybe leave and come back? How are you arranging that?
Really good question. Yep, there's no ticketing. There's nothing like that. You can RSVP on the website, and all that does is kind of give you updates and reminders and this sort of thing. I think it also helps the organizers have a sense of the numbers, but no, we just want people to come. I mean, it's the Basilica is huge. It can hold all of us. And hey, if we outgrow the Basilica, we'll come to Dodger Stadium next year and we'll do it there, but I think, I think it's helpful just because you can get other resources and that sort of thing if you RSVP, but there's no cost whatsoever. And
this is the third year. So the last 2 years, did you have a pretty good showing, or, has it gone up?
So like I said, the first year I wasn't able to attend. Last year I was there, and I don't have a great sense of what the numbers in the Basilica are like. Someone told me the number 3,000. I don't know. So I don't want anyone to quote me on that. But it was a lot of people. And it was really lovely to be able to see just, have you been to the National Shrine in Washington before? You got to come out sometime for that. It's a huge place. It's a really impressive building just because of its scale. And then when you're up at the altar and kind of looking out to a full church, it's pretty impressive actually to see. So, it was basically full last year. So we want to, have more of that, but it's in the thousands. I'll just put it that way.
That's great. So this year will be more.
Yeah, we're going to keep on doing it even bigger and better.
Well, yeah. I think there is a surge in people going to church. I know just this past week, a lot of it obviously has to do with Charlie Kirk's assassination. A lot of people are, making some decisions in their faith and making some, big, bold moves. And I know a lot of the churches were very full last weekend. I think people, God does that where he'll take something devastating and turn it into a positive or make it into something good. And so, I think this is a good time to have this pilgrimage. I think it, hopefully people will be inspired. How do you think our new Pope is hopefully inspiring Americans to draw closer to Christ and the church?
Well, yeah, I've, of course, been following as much as I can ever since he was elected. Completely exciting moment in the life of the church, especially as an American. And so what's super interesting about his tone, I guess you could call it, his preaching, he's not done anything, out of the ordinary. Actually, his preaching has all been about Christ and the church and just really straightforward this way. In a sense, unremarkable in the sense that it's just like, he's just preaching Christ. He's just preaching the church, and so I think if you listen to anything he says, you can't help but know who he is and what he's about, that way. And I hope, like you say, God uses providential moments of really bad things like the Charlie Kirk, assassination, or the different, I was talking to a priest in Australia a couple of days ago, and he said after Mass, this guy showed up for church kind of between the masses. And he's like, I don't know, I've just been reading about like the war in Gaza and all this sort of stuff. And I just felt like I should go to church, which is a really interesting response that people have. And it's a good one. And it shows that, okay, in a moment of crisis, even if you're not a believer or practicing, Christian, you know that I can go there and get something because of that. And it's a place that I can go. And so I think the church needs to take those opportunities really seriously and cultivate them somehow. So too, when something really joyful and great happens, like an American Pope, it's like, okay, when God blesses people and things and institutions, it's never a reward for good behavior, like out of merit. Blessings are always for the sake of what's going to come out of it, and I would say this about vocations, for example. So if you look at certain dioceses or certain religious orders that are getting vocations, and everyone says, well, what are you doing? What's the success story? What's the secret sauce? And I would say, I don't think that's how God works. I think he blesses a place or an institution for the sake of doing his work more manifestly somehow. And so if the church, if God has given the church an American Pope, then it means, okay, there's something American about this moment that we need to take really seriously, and to be, and to hear that call and to live our faith even more vigorously on the world stage in some way, because the world obviously needs it. The world's always needed it. Our times aren't any worse than other times, but these are our times. And so we should respond to that call as honestly and earnestly as we can.
Well, and I like what you're saying about the Pope, where he's, very focused on, Christ and the church. He's not going out in the weeds as of yet. He's, I feel very like safe and secure in his way, in his mannerisms, in his messages. I think, that gives me comfort. I know we have a new priest at our church. He's in his early 40s, and I like him because he's very straightforward. He's very firm in his faith. He's not, a lot of bells and whistles. He's just, I appreciate what he's saying. It's very thoughtful. It's very Jesus-like. I've told him that, I appreciate the type of priest he is. And I, encourage him to continue on with that way, because that's one thing, again, I love about the Catholic faith is I like the security of it. I like that, again, I work at the church, so we have a lot of people that drift in, and when they drift in, for the most part, I would say like the percentage is more high that they're coming in because they're seeking out peace and calm. And they know when they go in that church that Jesus is in there, and they're going to feel, a different way when they go into that church. It's like a beacon, and then there's every now and then there's something that's not, we have to be mindful and we have to be safe and careful. But for the most part, that's what I love about it. I mean, I love that we're a beacon to people, and I love that they think they can find safety and peace in our church, so,
Totally. No, this is something that you see all over the world. I mean, especially here in Rome, it's really interesting that when you do have the poor, homeless, who are on the streets, it's really interesting. They know that they can go to the church. It's super interesting, too, as a priest, as a religious, with a vow of poverty, by the way. The homeless will come up and ask you for money and things. I'm like, well, I probably have as much as you do right now. I mean, I am well taken care of. This is part of the religious life, but it's interesting. They're like, but what I think's beautiful about it is they go, no, I can go to this person. I can go to this place and be taken care of somehow. Before I moved to Rome, I was living in Minneapolis. And so there was that horrible shooting at Annunciation Catholic Church, during the school mass. And that's one of the great tragedies of that moment, among so many tragic things about that experience, is that, no, an essential part of our formation as Catholics is like knowing that the church is always a safe place. And it's a place where I can come and encounter Christ and be welcomed in by the church somehow. And to endanger that sense and expectation on people's parts is really evil and horrible, and something that's going to take a lot of time to recuperate. It was beautiful in the days after the shooting in Minneapolis, though. at least anecdotally, the people I talked to in other Catholic schools, other places around the Twin Cities, they were like, we're not canceling anything. We're just going to figure out what we have to do to make this place safe. Because it's so important that people have this experience. We're not going to run away from the difficulties or the challenges of it. And I think that's a really beautiful thing, because we have to preserve that, because that's what God's given us in the church. And so we want to preserve that insofar as we can.
Right. Well, that's beautiful. We're going to have to finish up, and I've really enjoyed this conversation with you, and I wish all the best success of this pilgrimage. I hope that you have many people that come, and it's a beautiful day and a life-changing day for people, and that they go out and then spread the good news, that they say, oh, I got this beautiful experience. And I hope it just expands for the good of the kingdom. But before I let you go, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you would like to say before I let you go?
No, I'm just really happy for people to know about the Rosary Pilgrimage. And there's a lot of information on the website, so please go look at that. Even if you can't come, physically, you can be there virtually. I'd like to hope I have something to say on that day. Maybe you've heard enough from me already, but also just the day itself is really beautiful, and it's a lovely thing to be able to see and to be part of. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity to speak about it.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, thank you for coming today. I've really enjoyed talking to you, and we will put links in the show notes. And so, and good luck in Rome. Lucky. You're lucky you're there. I was supposed to be going there next week, but I don't get to go this year. So God willing, I'll go next year.
It's going to be here.
Maybe I'll stop by and see you.
You're always very welcome at the Angelicum here at the Dominican University. Very welcome.
Okay. Thanks for coming. Thank you. Love you. Bye. Thank you for joining me today. Now go out and be a bright light in someone's life. And remember, be focused, be faithful, and be fresh. Fresh Catholic is produced, edited, and recorded in Ventura, California.